Okay, we are up to Daf Nun Gimel Amid Beis. Let's just review. You have Rav Meir. Rav Meir's shita is that if you're makdish and isha with hegdish, if you did it b'shoigig, the halacha is, the Mishnah says as follows: Hamakdish behegdish b'mezid kiddush or b'shoigig loy kiddush. It does not work b'shoigig; it works b'mezid. So we said, what's the reason? So we said yesterday, the reason is as follows: for hegdish to work, it's Hashem. So how is it yours? The answer is when you profane it and you're over meila, you made it yours. Rav Meir's shita is that there is no meila when you do an action b'shoigig because it's a mekach tois. Meaning, if you did it on purpose, you use money from hegdish. So if you know what you're doing and she knows what you're doing, so you did b'mezid, it profaned the money, making the money yours, yover nisser, fine. But by shoigeg, Rameir shita is, it's a mekach tois. The second she finds out about it, she's not happy about it, or you're not happy about it. So it's a mekach tois. Because it's a mekach tois, you're not over the semila. Nothing happened, it stayed holy. Okay, as we said yesterday. That was the mahalach of, I believe, Rav Yochanan, to explain Rameir. Amar Rav. Rav has a different approach. Rav says like this: Chazarnu al kol hatzdadim shel Meir. I've analyzed every sheet of Rav Meir in Shas. V'loy matzinu hegdish b'shoigig ein mischal b'mezid mischal. I've never seen this. Meaning that can't be. Rav Meir Taka holds b'shoigig. It's also mischal. Really b'shoigig. If you use hegdish accidentally, it's not a mekach tois, and it is mischal. Okay, so how come hegdish? So how come in our Mishnah, if you're makdish and isha b'shoigeg, it doesn't work? If it's mischalel, that means that it becomes yours. If it becomes yours, why does it not work? He says Mishnah seinu is b'kisaynes kahuna shalei balu hayul v'nitnu lahanis behen l'fishalei nitna tayril malachi asharis. He says here's the rule of Rameir. Generally, if you take hegdish and you use a b'shoigeg, you're over nisr meila, you're mischalel it, you profane it, it becomes yours. And therefore, generally, if you're makdish and isha with hegdish, it works. How come our Mishnah says it doesn't work? Our Mishnah is specifically talking about big day kahuna. Big day kahuna is as follows. Now think about it. A kohen, Rameir feels the only case where if you use hegdish b'shoigeg, you're not over meila, according to Rav, is dafka with the big day kahuna. Why? Because big day kahuna, think about it. You're allowed to wear it throughout the day. Obviously, that's the avoda. You're supposed to wear it. And you're obviously comfortable and you're happy. So when would you be over meila? When your shift is up, and then instead of taking it off right away, you're like, I like it, I'm going to wear it. That's meila. Says Rameir, that's the one time there's no meila b'shoigig. Why? Something which you're allowed to use generally, and the Torah understands it's impossible, it'll be very, very difficult. Therefore, it's dafka with the big day kahuna that's still wearable, that if you do it b'shoigig, it's not meila. And therefore, it's not profaned. That's the case of our Mishnah. So generally, if you take hegdish b'shoigig, according to Rav Meir, says Rav, you are over this meila. What our Mishnah says you're not, because our Mishnah says if you're makdish and isha b'shoigig, it doesn't work. So how come, what's the case of our Mishnah? Our Mishnah is dafka talking about a case of big day kahuna, because big day kahuna, which is something that you're allowed to benefit from under certain circumstances, the Torah feels, listen, it's too hard for, we're going to waive the Isser Me'ilah by big day kahuna. So because they're going to waive the Isser Me'ilah, means you didn't profane it, which means it's still Hashem's. If you try to be Magdish and Isha with big day kahuna, it does not work. That's the one time Rameir feels. So the case of the Mishnah where you're Magdish b'shoigig, it doesn't work, is dafka big day kahuna. That's Rameir shita. Says the Gemara, Tashema, let's analyze this. Kisunis kahuna shebalu, if you have clothing of the kahuna that are no longer wearable, mayilin bahem div Rameir. Rameir says there's mila. Now that makes sense because it's not wearable anymore. My lav afil loy balu. Can we assume that Rav Meir would say the same thing if it's wearable? Meaning, the same way if it's not wearable, you're over meila, so too if it's wearable, you're also over meila, and this is not what we're saying. We're saying that if it's wearable, there is no miser meila because the Torah, lonin atol malachi asharis, the Torah was not given to angels. The Torah understands it's too hard for a kohen to have to take it off right away. But Rav Meir says there's meila when it's worn out. Would he say the same thing when it's not worn out? The Gemara says, loy. Balu dafka. No, dafka when it's worn out. When it's worn out, you're not wearing it anyway. You want to use it for personal use, that's prohibited. That's Ivris Meila. But if it's wearable, then the halacha is because it's avoidable, but it's wearable because it's unavoidable. We waive the Issa Me'ila, hence it's still Hashem's. If you try to Magdish an Isha, it doesn't work. Okay? Now here's the problem. We're basically saying an interesting svara according to Rameir, and that is that according to Rameir, Bigdei Kahuna, there's no Me'ila on Bigdei Kahuna. Why? Because Bigdei Kahuna, so you say, why wouldn't there be Me'ila on Bigdei Kahuna? The reason why there's no Me'ila on Bigdei Kahuna is because it's something that it's basically very difficult to avoid. Listen, everyone can just avoid taking a cow of the Beis Hamikdash and using it. It's avoidable. You're going to be over the Isser. Bigdei Kahuna, it's think about it. I mean, you have to wear it anyway. It's basically very difficult to avoid. We're saying right now that if something is very difficult to avoid, we waive the Isser Me'ila. Here's the problem. You know what also is very difficult to avoid? The walls of Yerushalayim. The walls of Yerushalayim was built with leftover Chatzi Shekel. That's what they would use to build the walls of Yerushalayim, the walls of the old city. Now, is it very hard to avoid using the walls? Yeah, you sit by the shade, you walk past them, you lean on them. It's very, very hard to avoid. According to Rav Meir's Svara, there should be no Me'ila on the walls of Yerushalayim. There should be no Me'ila on the coins set aside for the walls of Yerushalayim because it's very hard to avoid. If you're telling me that we waive Me'ila by Bigdei Kahuna because it's just too hard and have Rachmanis on us, so then we should also waive the Me'ila on the walls of Yerushalayim, on the coins set aside for the walls of Yerushalayim, because they have the extension of the same halachas. The problem is, Rameir says there is Me'ila on those. So the Gemara is going to basically answer every single time we say Rav Meir says, we have to change the girsa to Rav Yehuda says. Every single time. That's basically the flow to the rest of this Amid. Let's see it inside. Tashima, moilin bechadatin, ve'ein moilin be'atikin. The Mishnah says, we know that there was Chatzi Shekel. Chatzi Shekel, the new Chatzi Shekel, that was this year's Chatzi Shekel, was used for the communal karbanos. If, let's say, you forgot to give this year's, so you realize you're a year behind, they had a special kupa. They would have special boxes for last year's. What would they do with last year's? They would use it for upkeep the walls of Yerushalayim. So says the Mishnah, there's Me'ila on new ones because the new coins are set aside for karbanos, so they have the status of karbanos. If you use them, there's Me'ila. Ve'ed molin l'chatikin, but there is no Me'ila on the old walls, because on the old coins, because the old coins have the status of are set aside for the walls of Yerushalayim, and the Tanakama feels there is no Me'ila on the walls of Yerushalayim, which makes a lot of sense. Comes Rav Meir Oimer, Moilin af ba'atikin. Rav Meir says, no, there's Me'ila on the old coins as well. Now here's the problem. If the old coins are used for building the walls of Yerushalayim, Rav Meir, in essence, is saying is there's Me'ila on misappropriating use of the walls of Yerushalayim. That shouldn't be. The same way we waive Me'ila on Bigdei Kahuna because it's very difficult, I think it's even more difficult to not use the walls of Yerushalayim for shade, for leaning against, when it's raining. I think it's even more difficult. So if Rav Meir's shita is that we're waiving Me'ila by Bigdei Kahuna, we should waive Me'ila by the walls of Yerushalayim. But that's not what he says. And the Gemara says, Shayir Meir Oimer, Rav Meir said, Moilin b'shirei halishka, there is me'ila on the leftover coins, even though they were not used for communal karbanos. V'amai, but wait a minute, why? Neima, we should say the same argument. Hoyel v'nitnu lihanis, we should say that because lefi shaloi nitna Torah malachi asharis, we should say that the Torah was not given to angels. The towers and the walls of Yerushalayim mishirei halishka, so they were used from those coins. So if you're telling me those coins are used for the walls, so why is there Me'ila on those coins? So the problem is, if Rav Meir's shita is that we waive Me'ila, according to Rav's interpretation of Rav Meir, is that there is Me'ila b'shoigig, but it's dafka waived by Bigdei Kahuna, so then it should be waived by here as well. So the Gemara says, Loi Tamer Rav Meir, Leimer Rav Yehuda. Change the girsa. It's not Rav Meir. Every time it says Rav Meir, change it to Rav Yehuda. That's why it says originally Div Rav Yehuda that was taken out in the brackets, like 10 lines from the top, because if you go to the end of the Gemara, it's definitely not Div Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda is the later one. You have to change the girsa. Originally it was Rav Yehuda, but then if you go with the teretz of the Gemara, it's not Rav Meir, it's Rav Yehuda. So you have to change the girsa. Every time Rav Meir says this, it's Rav Yehuda who says it. Okay. Tashma, another one. Titania, Rav Yishmael bar Rav Yitzchak, Avnei Yerushalayim shenishu ma'ilahem div Rav Meir. Same problem. Rav Meir says over here that if you have a stone that dislodges from the walls of Yerushalayim and you use it for personal use, it's me'ila, because it was bought with communal, with holy coins. But wait a minute. Same problem. We should waive me'ila on the walls of Yerushalayim because it's very difficult to avoid. So the Gemara says, same answer. Loi Tamer Rav Meir, Eleimer Rav Yehuda. Change the girsa. Meaning, when this brisa says that the walls of Yerushalayim have kedusha, and if you use them, you're over Me'ila. It's not Rav Meir, because Rav Meir would say we waive that because it's too difficult. It's Rav Yehuda. Here's the problem. Rav Yehuda's shita is that there is no Kedusha to the walls of Yerushalayim. Rav Yehuda's shita in general is that there is no Kedusha to the walls of Yerushalayim. So the problem is, you're telling me this is Rav Yehuda, but Rav Yehuda doesn't hold this way. So the Gemara says, Rav Yehuda, Yerushalayim Mikacha. Rav Yehuda's shita in the Dorim is that the walls of Yerushalayim do not have Kedusha. So if it's Rav Yehuda, how could you say that there's Me'ila by misusing the walls? Rav Yehuda's shita is that the walls don't have Kedusha. The Tanan, how do we know this? We know there's a concept in Nedarim where you take a permissible item, like a loaf of bread, and you say Zeh Kazeh, right? Like Zeh Karbon. If you say, it's called Nitvas, which is that if you say this should be like a Karbon, then it has the Isser like a Karbon is Aser. So the question is basically, if I say Zeh Kechaymas Ke Yerushalayim, like the walls of Yerushalayim, Rav Yehuda says it doesn't work because Yerushalayim is not Aser. So the Gemara says, Ke'imra, just so I can translate all the words properly. The Gemara says like this: if I take a loaf of bread and I say Ke'imra, it should be like a lamb. I mean a Karbon. Kedirim, like the enclosures, like the walls of Yerushalayim. Ke'etzim, like the logs. That's the logs on the Mizbeach. Ke'ishim, like the fires. Keheichel, like the Heichel. Kemizbeach, like the Mizbeach. Ki Yerushalayim, like Yerushalayim. All of those are good Nedarim because Yerushalayim has Kedusha to it. The walls of Yerushalayim have Kedusha. Rav Yehuda disagrees. He says, Kol ha'omer Yerushalayim lo yomer klum. Rav Yehuda says Yerushalayim does not have, the walls of Yerushalayim don't have Kedusha. So now, okay, that's what he says. If you say Yerushalayim, it's not effective nether. Now the Gemara, before we address Rav Yehuda's answer, before we acknowledge that Rav Yehuda believes the walls of Yerushalayim don't have Kedusha, the Gemara says maybe it's a problem because you didn't say Ki Yerushalayim, you said Yerushalayim. The problem that's not true. The Gemara says V'chite mishum d'lo yomer Ki Yerushalayim, and don't tell me it's because I said Yerushalayim and not Ki Yerushalayim. But Tanya, the Brisa says, Rav Yehuda Omer, Kol ha'omer Ki Yerushalayim lo yomer klum. If you say that this item should be like the walls of Yerushalayim, it's not effective because he feels the walls of Yerushalayim do not have Kedusha. The only time it's an effective neder is if you say it has the status of something that's brought as a Karbon in Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim doesn't. So here's the problem. We're saying right now, go to the next page. We're saying right now that Rav Meir holds that we waive Me'ila on something that's very difficult to avoid. So we should waive Me'ila on the walls of Yerushalayim, but he said that the walls of Yerushalayim have Me'ila. So we say, okay, it's not Rav Meir, it's Rav Yehuda. But that's not Rav Yehuda's shita. So you know what the answer is? Trei Tana Yininu Alibid Rav Yehuda. There are two students that are arguing what Rav Yehuda holds. Meaning, we're keeping it that it's Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda doesn't hold that way. It's a machlokes what Rav Yehuda holds. This Brisa version of Rav Yehuda with the Girsa change holds that Rav Yehuda feels the walls of Yerushalayim have Kedusha. That Mishnah in Nedarim, which says that it doesn't, was a different student. Two students who argue on what Rav Yehuda holds. But we're changing the Girsa to Rav Yehuda. Okay, fine. Just to review, forget about what we did today. Let's go yesterday. Okay, Rav Yochanan's Mahalich is that Hegdish, if you do Hegdish b'shoigeg, it does not work, meaning there's no Me'ila, so it's not a good Kiddushin. Memezid, it is a good Kiddushin. Meiser Sheni, Rav Yehuda holds, Rav Meir holds does not work at all because it's Hashem's. Rav Yehuda disagrees. So says the Gemara, Amar Ula Mishmei Bar Pedah, Ula says in the name of Bar Pedah, Rav Meir. Rav Meir used to say, Hegdish b'mezid mischal, b'shoigeg ein mischal. This is mamish the Rav Meir shita, the way Rav Yochanan had it, the Mishnah, our Mishnah's version, which is that with Hegdish. Okay, so I want to speak this out. Let's go with yesterday's Mahalach. Rav Meir's shita is, there is no me'ila b'shoigeg. So that would mean, right, because if you use a b'shoigeg, it's a mekach tois. Right, so let's say, I mekadesh an isha b'shoigeg, with money, of Hegdish money. So we said, the second she finds out, it's a mekach tois, which means you never were mekadesh her, which means the transaction never took place, so it was a moot point. The whole thing never started. So that would mean, if you'd ask me, stop right there, there's no isser, I didn't do an isser, and I don't have to bring a Karbon. That's what I even said yesterday. Says the Gemara, not so pashut. The Gemara says, Hegdish b'mezid mischal b'shoigeg mischal. Rav Meir shita is that if you use Hegdish b'shoigeg, it does not cause the items to become profane, meaning they're still holy, they're still Hashem's. But you still have to bring a Karbon. That's very strange. Meaning, you're still over Me'ila that you have to bring a Karbon, but the items are still holy. That's very strange because if the items are still holy, I didn't accomplish anything. I didn't actually do anything wrong. If I didn't do anything wrong, why am I bringing a carbon? And don't say it's because you tried, because when it comes to Averis, we don't go with effort, right? If you try to eat chazer, but you don't end up eating chazer, you're not going to bring a carbon. So the Gemara asks this kasha. If the items are still holy, according to Rabbi Meir, because it's a mekach tois, which means that the items are not profaned, which means, why am I bringing a carbon? I didn't do anything wrong at the end of the day. Maybe I tried, but at the end of the day, due to a technicality, I didn't do anything wrong. Why am I bringing a carbon? So the Gemara says, you're right. Okay. Elakiyasa Rabin, Parish Mishmei de Bar Pada, he clarified what Bar Pada meant. Generally, you do not have to bring a carbon if you do something b'shoigig, according to Rameir, because you didn't accomplish anything. The pasuk implies that there is me'ila b'shoigig. If you ate it. Meaning, if you take money that's hegdish, b'shoigig, and you try to buy something, Rav Meir feels it's a mekach tais, you didn't accomplish anything. You do not have to bring a carbon. But let's say I ate something. I ate hegdish b'shoigig. There's an apple. I ate it b'shoigig. That you will have to bring a carbon. Why? Because I'll tell you why. It makes a lot of sense. When you take the coins, right, and I used it b'shoigig, it turns out nothing happened. The coins are still here. I did not take them out of the domain of hegdish because they're still here and they're still holy. When you take an apple of hegdish and you eat it, it's gone. It's no longer in the rishus of hegdish because you ate it. Therefore, even though therefore you have to bring a carbon. Meaning, the only time Rameir acknowledges you have to bring a carbon me'ila by b'shoigig is if you eat it. Because when you have money, the item is still here. The me'ila means taking something out of hegdish's domain to my domain. So when the item is still here, if itaka is profaned, then you did that. But if it's a mekach tais, that means that the money is still Hashem's, the money is still here, it's still holy. But if you take an apple and you eat it, it's gone now. Due to your actions, the apple is no longer in hegdish's domain. It's gone. So therefore you have to bring a carbon me'ila. That's the only time Rameir acknowledges you have to bring carbon me'ila is if b'shoigig you ate something. Okay, fine. Now, Rav Meir's shita was that b'meiser, let's just analyze this. Meiser, Rav Meir holds shoigig or meiser doesn't work because meiser he looks at as Hashem's. It's not yours to be kind of anisha. Says the Gemara, Amar Menachem Ramrad Barabba halacha Rav Meir b'meiser. That's the halacha. We pass him like Rav Meir b'meiser. Why? Stam lantana gavase because we have a mishnah like him. So because we have a mishnah like Rav Meir, as we'll see in a moment. Therefore, we pass like Rav Meir that Meiser Sheni is holy, and therefore b'shoigig or b'mezid it doesn't work. Okay, the halacha Rav Yehuda behegdish, but by hegdish is the opposite. We pass like Rav Yehuda that if b'mezid it doesn't work, b'shoigig it works. Hayil v'stamlon tanagavasi because we have a mishnah. Again, Rav Meir shita behegdish is that b'shoigig there is no meila, only b'mezid. Rav Yehuda is the opposite. Dafka b'shoigig there's meila, not b'mezid, and we have a mishnah that follows him as well. So we have to quote a mishnah that follows Rav Meir by Meiser Sheni, that Meiser Sheni belongs to Hashem, and we have to bring a mishnah that follows Rav Yehuda that by hegdish there's only meila b'shoigig. Okay, let's see it inside. Krav Meir Meiser Maihi. What's the mishnah that follows Rav Meir? The Stam mishnah that follows Rav Meir. That follows Rav Meir that Meiser belongs to Hashem. Ditnan, the Mishnah is saying as follows. Okay, there are two items that you have to eat in Yerushalayim. There's Meiser Sheni, and there's called Kerem Revai. Right, the first 3 years of a fruit, it's Arla, you can't eat it. The fourth year, you eat it in Yerushalayim. So there's going to be a lot of similarities between the Meiser Sheni, which is eaten in Yerushalayim, and Kerem Revai, which is eaten in Yerushalayim. The halach is like this. When I redeem Meiser Sheni, let's say I can't make it all the way to Yerushalayim, so I redeem it. So its value of an apple is $10. I transfer the holiness onto cash. If I'm doing it myself, I have to add a 20% surcharge as a penalty for not bringing the fruit myself to Yerushalayim. I have to redeem it for $12. The question is, does that apply to Kerem Revai as well? Right, the fourth year apple, I can't get to Yerushalayim, so I want to transfer the money, the holiness onto money, and then spend the money in Yerushalayim. So the question is, do I have to add a 20% surcharge? By Meiser, yes. The question is Kerem Revai the same or not? It's a machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Let's see it inside. The Tanah, the Mishnah says, Mishnah in Peah. The Mishnah says Kerem Revai, fourth year fruit. Beis Shammai ein lo chomish. Beis Shammai says fourth year fruit are different than Meiser. There is no 20% surcharge. Ein loy beer. There's no time of disposal, right? Meiser, right? There's vidoy meiser, which is every third and sixth year you have to officially dispose, right? Bi'arti hakodesh min habayis. There's a point where you can't be too far behind. Kerem Revai is not like that. Technically, if you have a fourth year fruit, 3 years later you could bring it into Yushan. That's Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai looks at Kerem Revai and meiser separate. Beis Hillel disagrees. Beis Hillel says, I disagree. I think Kerem Revai is identical to Meiser. Okay. Another question. Does Kerem Revai have peret and oilus? Peret and oilus is set aside for poor people, right? That you have to leave over underripe grapes. It's sort of like, like peya, like standing grain, or shecha and leket. You have to leave certain things for the poor people. So grapes have their own. It's called peret and oilus. So the question is, peret is the grapes that fall off the clusters, and oilus are the underdeveloped grapes. So the question is, does peret and oilus apply to Kerem Revai? So Beis Shammai omrim yesh lo peret v'yesh lo oilus. Beis Hillel omrim kulei lagas. Beis Hillel says, I don't agree. You can keep all of it. Now let me ask you a question. What's this machlokes about? The first shaila of whether there's a 20% surcharge is whether Kerem Revai is comparable to Meiser or not. Okay? Same shaila over here. Beis Shammai feels they're separate. Beis Hillel feels they're the same. Okay. Why is it that Beis Shammai feels that Kerem Revai has peret and oilus? Peret and oilus only apply to your things. If it's God's, you don't have to give God's stuff to poor people. Beis Hillel shita is that Kerem Revai is learned out from Meiser. The same way Meiser is LaHashem, it's God's and you have permission to eat it, so too Kerem Revai is God's and you have permission to eat it. If it's God's, you don't have to give it to poor people. You don't have to separate Meiser from tzedakah. Like, that doesn't work. So Beis Hillel shita, that kulei lagas, that there's no peret and oilus, there's no inyan to give matnas aniyim. You don't have to give any aspect, any percentage to the poor people. Why? Because it's not yours. It's not karmecha. It's kerem Hashem. Where do they learn that out? From Meiser, which means that by Meiser, Beis Hillel shita is, it belongs to Hashem. This is a proof to Rav Meir. Rav Meir shita is that Meiser belongs to Hashem, and therefore if you mekadesh an isha, bein b'shogeg meiser, it does not work. This Mishnah follows Rav Meir, because this Mishnah says that according to Beis Hillel, there is no peret and oilus by Kerem Revai, because Kerem Revai is learned out from Meiser, and there's no peret and oilus by Meiser. Why? Because it's Hashem's and it's not yours. So you see that Beis Hillel shita is that Meiser belongs to Hashem and it doesn't belong to you. That's the proof. It's a cheshbon. The Gemara says, "My time of the Beis Hillel." What's Beis Hillel shita? Gamri kodesh me meiser. They have a gzeir shava comparing with the word kodesh, comparing Kerem Revai to meiser. Ma meiser yesh lechomish yesh lebir. Af Kerem Revai yesh lechomish yesh lebir. Beis Hillel like gamri kodesh me meiser. That's the machlokes. Beis Hillel compares Kerem Revai to meiser. So what's the next step? Ubeis Hillel oimer b'meiser. Now Beis Hillel shita then is that there is no peret and oilus by Kerem Revai, because there is no peret and oilus by Meiser. Why? Because it belongs to God. And the Gemara speaks it out. Kiman Srile, who is that like? Ikar of Yehuda, afilu kulei gas. Ha'amar Meiser mamen hediyu. It can't be Rav Yehuda, because Rav Yehuda shita is that Meiser belongs to you. If it belongs to you, why are you not giving it to poor people? Ela lav Rav Meir. It must be, this is a proof to Rav Meir, that Meiser belongs to Hashem. Because it belongs to Hashem, you're not chayiv to give it to Aniyim. If you're not chayiv to give it to Aniyim, then you're not chayiv to give it to Aniyim, Kerem Revai either. Hence, Beis Hillel follows Rav Meir. That's why we pass like Rav Meir, because Stam Lan Tanakavase, because this Mishnah follows Rav Meir. Fine? Let's go weiter. Now, Hegdish, we follow Rav Yehuda. Why do we follow Rav Yehuda? Because we have a Mishnah that follows Rav Yehuda. Again, Rav Yehuda's shita is that by Hegdish, there is Me'ila b'shoigig, not b'mezid. Who is that like? There's a Mishnah that says Mamish like him, Rav Yehuda b'Hegdish mahi, ditnan. The Mishnah says in Me'ila, Shilach biyad pikeach, v'nizkrat shaloi hegia eitzel chenveni, here's the case. I have Hegdish money. I accidentally give Laufer the Hegdish money and I say, do me a favor, take this to the store, let him, he wants to borrow it. It's fine. Now, I don't know that it's Hegdish. You don't know that it's Hegdish. You're walking to Wasserman's. On your way there, I realize it's Hegdish. You realize it's Hegdish. You still give it to the Wasserman's. They use it. So I'm mazid. You're mazid. He's shogig. He's the only one who doesn't know. Who's over the Isser? Him. That's the Mishnah says. Why? Not me, not you. Because there's no Me'ila. Again, we're both over Averis. But who brings a carbon? He does. Because there's no Me'ila b'mezid, there's only Me'ila b'shogig. That's clearly like Rav Yehuda. Okay. That's a Mishnah, like Rabbi Yehuda, that there's only Me'ila b'shoigig, not b'mezid. In this case, you have three people, the Mishaleach, the Shliach, and the Chenveni. The only one who's shoigig is the Chenveni. And it says, who's Ma'al? Chenveni. Because there's only Me'ila b'shoigig, not b'mezid. So that's a pretty clear proof, like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay? Now, here's the point. How do we paskin in Meiser? We paskin like Rav Meir, that Meiser belongs to Hashem. Why? Because we had this very long Mishnah that we proved that Beis Hillel follows Rav Meir. Okay. We have Mishnayos that imply that Meiser belongs to you, right? We had this long proof that we have a Mishnah that Beis Hillel, we proved, follows Rav Meir, that Meiser belongs to God. And that's why we paskin like Rav Meir. I'll be honest with you. By the way, that Mishnah, just put in the back of your mind, that Mishnah that I quoted is found in three places, that Beis Hillel follows Rav Meir. Peah, Meiser Sheni, and Idias. Remember that, okay? The point is, so because the Mishnah we proved follows Rav Meir, we paskin like Rav Meir. There are Mishnayos that I think imply, like Rav Yehuda, that Meiser belongs to you and not God. Rav Yehuda, Meiser Miloi Tanan, I can find Mishnayos that imply like Rav Yehuda. How so? V'atanan, the Mishnah says, this is a Mishnah Meiser Sheni. Hapoide Meiser Sheni Shaloi, right? If you redeem your own Meiser Sheni, right, you want to transfer the holiness onto cash, Meiser V'lev Chamishasa, right, you have to add a 20% surcharge. Bein Mishaloi, whether the Meiser Sheni is yours, Bein Shenit Nelematana, whether you grew that Meiser Sheni or whether you received it as a gift. Okay. Let me ask you a question. What that means is, you want to transfer the holiness of your Meiser Sheni onto cash, you have to add 20%. How'd you get that? Either you're a farmer, or I gave it to you as a gift. How do I give you Meiser Sheni as a gift? If Meiser Sheni belongs to Hashem, I can't give it to you as a gift. Only an owner can gift an item, right? If it's Hashem's that He is allowing me to eat, I cannot gift it to you. So how are you being gifted this fruit? So it must be, this Mishnah follows Rabbi Yehuda, that Meiser belongs to you. Because it belongs to you, you can do with it whatever you choose. So the Gemara has to be set up money. Who offered this Mishnah that you could actually gift Meiser Sheni fruits? Which means, again, I have fruit. I separate 10% as Meiser Sheni. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to go to Yerushalayim. Adam, there's your gift. The halacha is it works. That's what the Mishnah says. Matana. How do I do that? If it's Hashem's that He allows me to eat, I'm not the balabas to gift it to someone else. Hashem's the balabas. So the Gemara says money. Rav Yehuda, if this follows Rav Meir, I'm saying if this follows Rav Meir that Meiser belongs to God, how do you give that as a gift? It belongs to Hashem. Elav Rav Yehuda. This Mishnah follows Rav Yehuda. So why are you saying that we follow Rav Meir? Because I have a Mishnah that follows Rav Meir. I have a Mishnah that follows Rav Yehuda. So the Gemara says no. Lo'ilam Rav Meir. Really, it's Rav Meir. So how do I ever gift it? It's very simple. It just says you got the fruit as a gift. I can give you fruit in different stages, right? Once I separate 10% as Meiser Sheni, Rav Meir feels I can't gift it because it's now God's. What if I gave you the fruit before I separated Meiser? I had 100 fruit. I didn't separate anything yet, and I gift it to you then. Everyone would be okay with that because it's not yet separated. It's not yet God's. That's the case. All it says is that you got the fruit. How'd you get it? You either a farmer, you planted it yourself, or you got it as a gift. It never said you got it as a gift after it was already hufrish from Meiser. You got it a gift when it was still tevel. When it's still tevel, it's not Hashem's yet. It's only Hashem's when you separate Meiser. That's it. Very simple. You can follow it. The Gemara says, the case is betivla. You gave the Meiser before it was separated, before it was hufresh. Ukasaver, and the Tan of that Mishnah holds, it's not yet Meiser. It's only Meiser when it's separated. Once it's separated, a mayor feels it belongs to Hashem. But the case is it was not yet separated. It was still tevel. Then, of course, you could gift it. The Gemara has the exact same back and forth about, again, gifting. How do you gift? Instead of Meiser, it's Kerem Ravai. But again, Kerem Ravai is compared to Meiser. The Mishnah implies you could gift it, which sounds like Rav Yehuda, and the answer is no, you gifted it before it was already mechuyev in Kerem Ravai. Same thing. The Gemara says, Tashma, another proof. Hapoide neter Ravai shaloi. Again, you're redeeming your neter Ravai. You don't want to take the fourth year fruit to your shalayim, so you're redeeming it. Ma'isa v'chamishasai. Again, this follows Beis Hillel, that we compare neter Ravai to Meiser, and therefore you have to add a 20% surcharge. Bei mishaloi, whether you got the fourth year fruit because you planted it yourself. Bei mishenit lematana, whether you received it as a gift. Money. Well, Keren Ravai is learned out from Meiser, which means if you can get Keren Ravai as a gift, it means you can get Meiser as a gift. How do you get Meiser as a gift? I thought it belongs to God. It must be if follows Rav Yehuda, and the answer is the same thing. The Gemara says money. Ilem Rameir Matzi Avle Hagamri Kodesh Kodesh Meiser El Rav Yehuda. It must be it's Rav Yehuda. Therefore, it belongs to you. Meiser belongs to you, and therefore Keren Ravai belongs to you, and that's why you could gift it. The Gemara says Lo Ilem Rameir. Really, it's Rameir. Hachamay Eskin Anged Yav Kishu Samdar. The cases where you gave the fruit before it was considered a fourth year fruit. How so? You gave it when it was considered budding. It was not yet grown. It's only considered the first 3 years that it's us, and the fourth year that it's Yerushalayim, when it's already budded, when it's already a grape that's budded. If you give it before it's ripened, it's called samdar. Samdar means the bud before it even budded at all. The halach is it's not considered a fruit, so doesn't have the restrictions of Arlin. It doesn't have the restrictions of Keren Ravai. That's why you can gift it. Meaning, once it's already the fourth year fruit, it's already budded in the fourth year, or budded. Yeah, it's budded in the fourth year. Then it's considered Keren Ravai, and it belongs to God. Why? So how do I gift it? The answer is I gifted it before it was considered a fruit yet. I gifted it when it was still like a branch, whatever. Yeah. The Gemara says, and this does not follow Rav Yossi, who feels that a produce in the budding stage is considered a fruit. We follow it's not a fruit. Okay, one last proof. The last proof is, again, we're saying that we follow Rav Meir because we have a Mishnah that follows Rav Meir. I have a Mishnah that follows Rav Yehuda. How so? The Mishnah says as follows, Tashema. The Mishnah is referring to a person who is buying Ma'aser Sheni. Okay? Or not buying necessarily, but I'll pay for it and I'll transfer the holiness for you. Okay? So basically like this. If it's yours and you transfer the holiness onto cash, you have to add 20%. If I'm doing it for you, I don't have to add 20%. Right? If I'm koned from you, and then I don't have to add 20%. Question is, what if I did Mashicha from you for your fruit, and then before I actually gave cash, it went up in value? So the Mishnah says like this: again, I'm purchasing Ma'aser Sheni from you. And by the way, I guess you could still purchase Ma'aser Sheni even if it belongs to Hashem, because you could purchase Hegdish. You could transfer, redeeming. We don't have a problem with redeeming. So I'm redeeming your Ma'aser Sheni. So I want it to become mine, and then I'll transfer the cash without a 20% surcharge. So I take it from you. I go to your house. It's very simple. I go to your house and I say, listen, I'll take care of it for you. You're like, okay, it's in the kitchen. I go into the kitchen, I take your apples, I walk home, take the money, do the whole kinyan. Problem is, from the time I took the apples in your house till I did the cash, it doubled in price. So the question is, when did it become mine in value? When I was kaina with Mashicha, it's mine, and therefore I can go with the lower price? Or is it only mine when I gave the money? What does the Mishnah say? The halacha is, you only have to give when you did Mashicha, it's yours. Here's the problem. Mashicha only works on personal property. It does not work on Hegdish. Holy stuff, you need to transfer it with money. So here's the problem. You're telling me, again, Rav Meir's shita is that Ma'aser Sheni belongs to God. If Ma'aser Sheni belongs to God, then Mashicha is not kaina. Mashicha is only kaina on personal property. If it belongs to Hashem, and I'm redeeming it the same I'm redeeming Hegdish, cash is king. So over here we're saying that Mashicha is kaina, and therefore I can go with the lower price. That obviously holds that Ma'aser Sheni is personal property, which is Rav Yehuda. So the Gemara says, money, according to Rav Meir, it belongs to Hashem, which means v'nosan hakesef, you need cash. Mashiach is only kaina on mam and hedyet. Mashiach is only kaina on personal property. Mashiach is not kaina on hegdish. So Elulav, it must be the fact that Mashiach works means that Ma'aser Sheni is personal. If it's personal, that follows Rav Yehuda. Oh, so okay, here's the problem. That's an unavoidable proof. We'll end the daf today is as follows. We said we passing like Rav Meir because we have a Mishnah like him. This is a Mishnah like Rav Yehuda. So, Mishnah. Why do you follow Rav Meir over Yehuda? So the Gemara says, Lo'elam Rav Yehuda, hachachad stama, hachatreis stami. First of all, answers as follows. We have two Mishnayos like Rav Meir, only one like Rav Yehuda. So 2 beats 1. Okay, that's the answer. And here's the problem though. If you're going to go with the fact that, why do you go with the Stam Mishnah? Why is that a Stam Mishnah we follow like? Because you're saying when Rav Yehuda Hanasi compiled or wrote the Mishnayos, whatever he did, or Shir Gaon has different versions, whatever he did, if he made it as a Stam, he's saying we should follow that way. So you think it matters if there's 2 Stam Mishnahs or 1 Stam Mishnah? Like, what does it matter? If the whole point is a Stam Mishnah, it's like, the whole point is that Rabbi Yehuda is saying, this is how I follow. So if he did that, then like, oh, but there's two? Like, why would two beat one? Like, it just sort of doesn't make sense. Like, you either can follow a Stam Mishnah because that's the Ratzon of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, or you can't. You don't start counting up like two beats one. What two beats one? It's either Rabbi Yehuda Nasi Shita or not. So the Gemara says, Istam adafka mali chad stam mali tre stam. If Stam Mishnah was on purpose, then it doesn't make sense to go 2/1. If it's not on purpose, then it doesn't matter. So, like, what's the pshat? So the answer is, with this, the answer is, we follow Rav Meir not because it's a Stam Mishnah, it's a Stam Mishnah in Idias. Idias was considered the choices of the Mishnayos. So Ataka is Rav Meir against Rav Yehuda, Stam against Stam. But Rav Meir, Stam beats him because it's a Stam in Idias, which beats out a Stam in Ma'aser Shen. All right, we'll stop here. Pick it up tomorrow. Whatever the time is.